My name's Brad Sorensen, and then let me go ahead and jump into the program, and we'll kind of go from there. So we're going to do is talk about who's going to be chatting with you today. We're going to talk a little bit just to kind of give you a 100,000-foot view of really where kind of things are from a loss perspective. This session is around personal lines. There may be something that would follow around commercial, but personal is really kind of where we focused our attention on this one. We're going to talk about best practices, and I'll lay out how we set up session 1 and then session 2, which will be next week. And then we're going to talk about things that we see as it relates to prospecting clients and pre-qualifying clients when you're trying to really focus on trying to control losses where you can. So our group, myself, Brad Sorensen, the real description of my role is I'm responsible for driving new business opportunities and new revenue opportunities for kind of our broad company, Iscential. David Hollingsworth, I am sorry. David actually is, he's got a challenging life. He's in Scotland this week. He will join the group next week. He's the chairman of Iscential Board, but really kind of the backstory on David. He spent 30 plus years at Nationwide, really kind of running various pieces of all the property casualty companies. So very, very knowledgeable in the property casualty insurance industry. Stephanie Garzan, I don't believe Stephanie's on, but Stephanie is our director of support. Stephanie will probably have a lot to contribute, especially next week too, when we get in a little more of the tactical procedural things that we would recommend putting in place. But she also has a significant responsibility she's kind of the funnel for us bringing in new employees. And so she's responsible for not only recruiting, but then getting them trained and onboarded. So a lot of what she sees is how do you take green people, how do you train them, how do you help them understand the processes that we've put in place. And then Mark, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, get a little infomercial about you.
Sure. Thank you, Brad. Hey, everyone. My name's Mark Michaels. I'm the Director of Claims, Quality, and Loss Control. Do a little bit of each. My background, been in the claim business for about 30 years with Farmers, Nationwide, and Travelers. So big carriers. I've handled pretty much all to a lot of the loss control piece now and the quality piece, as far as just making sure that our agents' files are up to speed and everything's in our system, so that we don't have any E&O claims. So glad to be here with you guys.
Yeah, and as we go through this, and I know we got quite a few people on the call, but don't be shy. Whether it's asking a question, raise your hand, put it in the chat box. I want to make this as interactive as we can versus myself or Mark really just kind of reading through slides and bullets of slides. So when you start to think at the industry perspective, and again, Mark and I kind of have a unique setting because of the fact that we do have background for sitting within the carrier side. They're probably in the most troublesome time they've been in a really long time as it relates to having what I would call a handle or a control on the losses that they're seeing. In auto, obviously the increased repair costs, there's a significant increase in losses due to thefts, and then distracted driving has obviously been a problem for a while. From a home standpoint, the increased material costs, and then water coverage, damage, those kinds of things continue to be problematic. And then from umbrella, most people may not necessarily associate identity theft specifically on the personal line side, but they do see quite a bit of an increase in that identity theft element and how that is or isn't covered from an umbrella standpoint. Mark, any other comments or additions on that?
Auto issues, as far as what I see, is the supply chain has caused a lot of delays on parts, so it's really affecting the rental car coverage quite a bit, because people are going to limit out on that, and then carriers are being very
okay.
very strict, and hey, that's all you get. So supply chain issues, it's getting a little bit better, but a lot of the carrier costs have gone to that. Same pretty much with the home. A high increased cost in materials. You do still have some supply chain issues, and labor costs have just gone through the roof. So everything's costing more, and carriers are just trying to keep up.
And then if you think about loss and why it's important, I mean, these are intuitive, but we want to put these in place because some people may not put all the pieces together or think about it. Obviously, it can have a revenue impact to your agency, revenue impact to the whole group that you guys represent, and then even a revenue impact to you guys personally, just as it relates from a profitability standpoint. Depending on the scenario, we're going to talk a lot about today's really around the upfront of attracting clients, level setting with clients, looking for clues with clients. But there can be a significant customer experience element if the right stage isn't set and or the right expectations aren't set with your client. Conversely, too, we hope that or expect that most of you kind of have this value proposition. What do you stand for in the marketplace? If you think about, somebody stops you on the street corner and they say, what do you do? What is that value you bring? Well, if you get clients that aren't a good fit, if you get clients that maybe you've not fully explained the scenario, that value prop kind of gets compromised. It either gets compromised in their mind, or for you guys, you may have clients that really aren't a good fit. They may wear you out. They may ask things that are more problematic. So it can be an alignment issue there. And then carrier relations. Mark and I mentioned this yesterday, and I'm assuming all of you know this, but I can tell you that every carrier has a perception of the quality of business you guys write. And most of you are in the middle. Most of you have not had problematic issues, but they know the people that are really strong, really produce a lot, and have great loss ratios, and they have a good handle on things. And then they have at least a mental list of their problem children. And so that can have an impact on your carrier relationship, offering compensation, continuation of contract, all of that can have an element. So that's why another reason why loss control can play into the importance for you guys to manage to. And then lastly, from a market availability, right? I'm assuming you guys have a core set of go-to carriers that really kind of solve the majority of your clients' needs. If you're to lose one of those carriers, that may disrupt your ability to actually serve the market. So making sure that you keep really kind of the carrier lineup that to some degree you fight for and arm wrestle for in good tact is important from that standpoint. And some of the causes in it's a little cliche, but a lot of this has to do with just good old-fashioned processes, right? We see it in any of the agencies that we've worked with, that repetitive training, and training can go in a lot of different directions. I know for us, we try to leverage training in a lot of different ways. We do training internally, which is really more around the expectations of the agency, how they should solicit customers, how they should bind customers, how we should do account reviews. We train on that. But additionally, we're very open and proactive to get training from our carriers. For two reasons. They're very willing to talk to you either individually or group if they think that's going to help you perform better and write better business, as well as that training. And you're going to see this woven through here. The carriers are changing their risk appetite, their preferences frequently, way more frequently than maybe in the past. So keeping that training is important because what you thought may have been in place 3 months ago, 6 months ago may have changed. That bleeds into the poor carrier knowledge again, knowing what is out there. I perceive that you don't holistically have this, but one thing I know that I've talked to a couple of the SNA members about is it would be very much worth your while if you could find a way to have some centralized one place to reference as it relates to carriers and the specific coverages, nuances they may have. I know for us, we have experts within carriers, but we have one place that's one version of the truth. So if we want the most updated information on somebody's appetite, somebody's limits, somebody's tolerance, we put that in one centralized place so that the staff doesn't have to spend an inordinate amount of time going to try find something, or if they're assuming something's still in place and it actually has changed. Another way from a process standpoint is check and balance. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, and then we'll hit that a lot heavier next week. But what check and balance do you have in your agency as it relates to taking a prospect, to getting them bound, and to get in working the renewals? That can be follow-up of information, all those kinds of things, and we'll explain that a little bit. And then a defined sales process. And then we're going to dive into that one a little bit further, because whether you sell or not, it's important how that client came in through the front door and what expectations were set. So the way that we've broken up the training looks kind of directionally like this. This is session 1. And again, we're going to hit the best practices from a quality standpoint, really setting the tone early, as well as then some approaches and things to look for from a prospecting and pre-qualifying. Next week, then, we're going to really kind of focus on more the nuts and bolts as it relates to what standards need to be in place and what auditing and control agencies can deploy to make sure that you get a good handle on things. It's funny, Mark was on a call a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned that he was in charge of loss control in claims, and I didn't put quality in there, and he's been inundated because as an agency, we thought quality was something we always focused on, but it's so important for us. We wanted somebody to wake up in the morning and actually have a quality expectation, right? So those controls on the bottom right, Mark, I know that you've become very familiar with what's in place and continue to tweak those as we see things to make us more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're continuing to tweak that. Yep.
Hey, Brad, it's Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Can I hop in, just add a few comments right quick?
Absolutely, please do.
I know we got a bunch of different folks on here today, and we had about 40-something people on the call yesterday. I'm Kevin with Kevin Painter Insurance, and one of the kind of original guys that was there at SNA. And I just want to further stress to the folks on here today why we're having these classes. This market, particularly in Georgia, more so than out in Texas that y'all are dealing with, this market in Georgia, particularly on auto, is taking a very hard turn left. And so we've got some SNA agencies that are feeling some pressure from an underwriting standpoint and loss standpoint, having some losses. So we're trying to be proactive from an SNA standpoint, investing back in the agencies, trying to help our agencies be better profit centers, trying to make, maybe there's been some training issues that maybe there hadn't been some training that needed to be done. So, to help improve loss ratios. That's the whole goal of this. It's not anything punitive. It's trying to be proactive to keep, agencies from losing their contract, because if losses continue for everyone, then that puts pressure on the individual agency and puts pressure on SNA, and everybody has to start making decisions. So, I know we've got some seasoned veterans on here, and we got some, what you would say, rookies on here, but young and old on this call can learn something. It may be something you go, you know what, I knew that was 10, 15 years ago, kind of forgot about it. And that's our goal, is trying to help everyone recognize what is good underwriting practice, the things that you can do, and trends. We do a bad job at SNA when us as owners go off to our meetings. We learn all this stuff and we hear it from the carriers, and we do a bad job transferring it back to the staff. Mm-hmm. So the staff today is getting to hear it firsthand from y'all and stuff. And I know we've got some other SNA owners and stuff on here be hopping in and out, and I'm going to be on here briefly as well, just trying to add, but we can all learn. And that's the goal of this. We have got to keep loss ratios under control. We got to be proactive and help your agency, help SNA, because if we ain't protecting everybody, we're losing in this game.
Yeah, Kevin, and I appreciate that. And I don't know when you jumped on, I mentioned that, we did get good feedback from yesterday and tried to explain some of the things that we're bringing to bear, aren't necessarily are always applicable to Georgia, right? Georgia's got a very unique market. You and I have talked about that. This is how we met, right? Yep. From when I was at Grange. So, but
we know we know some of y'all out in Texas and Ohio are a little stranger than us in Georgia. So
well, thank you. Just what I need is a Kevin Painter slam at 217 today. Thank you. So anyhow, for this kind of sets up the training. And again, like I said, once I'm done, you do not have the invite yet. I will send the invite for next Tuesday and Wednesday, exact same times. Pick one of those two, and I'll make sure that the invites come through cleanly. So let's kind of jump into things then a little bit more. And again, please stop us. We're going to call on you like right now, but we're going to try to make this interactive. So the first thing we talk about when you really think about it is who's your ideal client, right? So if somebody would, volunteer or tell us who's an ideal personalized client that you're like, man, me and my agency are a perfect fit for this person. What do they look like? So for you, what's an ideal client?
This is something we've been discovering in Stallings Insurance Agency for a few years now, and it can change. But I think currently, it's kind of the American dream, right? Like married, a few kids, house, couple cars, financially sound. Typically, somebody that would have a financial planner. No accidents, no tickets,
right?
No dogs, no trampolines, no pools, no exposure.
So it's interesting because Kevin volunteered for yesterday's and the same thing, right? You give for the first one, they're married, couple kids, couple cars, right? But then you add in, for instance, not a pool, or they got a financial planner, and it literally leads into that second one, which really for you turns into clues, right? Some of those are nice to haves, and some of those are must haves, right? And then the last one, and whether it's you or somebody else who wants to volunteer, how well do you think your agency actually does a good job of attracting those clients that you think are a good fit?
There's always room for improvement at Stallings Insurance Agency, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anybody else got a perspective on the last point as it relates to how well you're doing? Do you hit it most times, or do you think that there's a disconnect?
I just want to kind of add, I go back to my rookie days in insurance, and underwriters I used to be scared of underwriters and used to be scared to talk to them. But I had an underwriter tell me one day, and it still holds true today, is, Kevin, if you're having to call and ask about this person, if you should insure them, then you need to really think about what you're calling and asking about. If you're having to call, then you've got a question to start with. But always, and this sounds very elementary and crazy, if you're not willing to put your own money on that client, then you probably need to be writing them somewhere. Not writing them at all, really, but considering where you're writing them. Yeah. Because they may be a substandard risk.
Yeah, it is a great point. And the reason why we bring it up, and maybe a little bit preaching to the choir, but this is a good example where if you don't actually try and position yourself to attract the right clients, you're going to get what you're actually asking for. Right. So it's got to have some intent. It's not going to be perfect. To Melissa's point, look, not everybody walks through the door is going to be this absolute layup. That's okay. And we're going to get into that a little bit. The discussion yesterday actually talked about what's gray versus what's totally out of bounds. And we'll talk about that.
It's kind of funny hearing Melissa's ideal client because, my description yesterday, hers and mine, were almost identical with one exception. Yeah. She wants them to have a financial planner. I don't want them to have a financial planner because I want to sell them life insurance. And so there we go.
Be careful. Most financial planners skip over the life insurance. So, but anyhow. All right. So we want to share with you one way we approach this, right, as it relates to from a fit standpoint. Whether it's a referral source, whether it's a cold call, whatever it might be, we train our sales folks to really approach a client around what we would call a base recommendation. And we talk about the value of the agency. We educate them about the choices they may have. We really stress and tell them that our job is to provide them options. It's not to decide for them, but it's to understand their scenario, come up with the best recommendation we can, as well as then provide them options depending on how that scenario, the bottom line of that scenario fits. And then we do really kind of approach it. What you may think of risk management as something that doesn't apply necessarily to somebody selling someone a home and an auto, but there is an element of my job's to understand your risk and to make recommendations for you to solve those risks, even though it may be just a home and an auto for somebody that's young. And then on the right-hand side, this is what we actually expect our salespeople to put in front of folks. If somebody's calling and saying, hey, I want an auto quote, we very much vet out front, and I'm going to get into this, but we very much put up front, my job, I can't do my job if all I'm doing is talking to you about your auto. I need to understand your story, and I'm going to put this stuff in front of you. It's up to you to be able to understand it and make a decision if you want to go with it. But I'd be deficient in my role if I didn't put all these in there. So home, auto, umbrella, flood, in marine, and a life insurance policy. So I'm curious, does anybody on the phone, I mean, is this a practice that you have where if you have a personal lines client, this is pretty much what you would offer on a regular basis, or does it vary by client? Varies by client? Amy, I see you shaking your head.
I would say varies by client.
Okay. Just understand if it does vary by client, and we'll get into it, right? But you can really erode or deteriorate what you're trying to make sure you're representing if you're picking and choosing and maybe sometimes not hitting things like flood or umbrella or whatever the case may be. And then we talk about it within our group, and we have preached this to quite a few agencies we've worked with. You have to have, we think, this spectrum as it relates to truly training and having it quote unquote documented or formalized, right? So for instance, we train on how to prospect. How do you qualify? What questions do you ask? Techniques and how to listen. How do you use scripts? One of the things that we have found, especially when we bring in new producers, we have scripts, and we try not to be robotic, but I would tell you that when we have a new producer, whether they're green to the market or new to us, we have scripts that they need to work, and it's not you work 80% of the script. It's you work the whole script. There's a reason why we have you say the specific things you say. As people advance, we give them a little more latitude, but that prospecting and expectation and the scripts are really around how to articulate what you're standing for, what you're going to try to do, what you need of the client. And we see that really does a good job of setting the tone of, instead of us just like a dog, kind of waiting, oh, by the way, I get to quote your auto, and then I hope you call me back. That doesn't get anybody anywhere, right? So we really focus on the prospecting. Then we really try to hone in that everybody can have an element of managing risk, whether it is holistic across a business and the owners, or whether it's isolated and a married couple that's renting and got one car. How do you understand what they're doing? How do you explain how you're different? And then how do you understand their story and help them manage to it? We also have a technique when we go to sell that talks about best company first. And I'll be curious, but the setup for best company first is what, Mark? We're over 140 carrier appointments, right? Nobody in our company knows the ins and outs of all 140. We actually don't want that. We want people to have 3 to 5 go-tos in personal lines, commercial, whatever the case may be. But we have a systematic way of talking about our portfolio carriers and how price is the last thing we consider. So we talk about, are they stable? We talk about their claims reputation. We talk about solving the needs. We talk about presence in the market. We talk about how they're owned and the decisions they may make. And if all those things are equal, then we say, you know what, I selected ABC because the price was the most competitive. But we do that because we don't want on a situation where we're leading with price. If you're having a price conversation, you're already in the wrong conversation. Secondly, we also take the time to say, look, this carrier has been stable. Yes, they take rates every once in a while or consistently, but they're not a roller coaster. And setting that expectation up with the client is important because you may save them money, but you may know they're going to get killed the next year. If you don't tell them that, they're going to feel ambushed. You're the reason why, not that company. So we really try to talk to about level setting with our clients. We talk about multi-lining. I showed you the base recommendation. We actually make sure that we edit and monitor people to make sure they are fully quoting. And then we try to make sure that as that selling goes through, that we're watching and following up with people. Every one of our associates has a very clear expectation for the data and the follow-up items they're responsible for. In fact, Mark, we may change Mark's title from director to czar because he is one of the czars in making sure we don't want incomplete files. We don't want missing data. We don't want policies that are going to be a landmine that get placed. The producer feels great that they put it in force, and then it's just going to implode later on down the road. And then we don't talk about it necessarily in this session, but look, one of the offshoots of a lot of things we're going to talk about from a loss control is you should get better retention. You should have clients that better understand you, that clients that perceive you're trying to have their back for them. More lines of business has always proven out to be way stickier from a retention standpoint. So that can be an element that's a side benefit to the things we're talking about. Mark, anything from your perspective on any of these?
Yeah, on the data piece, you kind of touched on it briefly, but we always have a saying that if it's not in the system, it didn't happen, because you want to always, anytime you go into a file, you want to know what's going on. So yeah, if it's not there, it didn't happen. And
Mark's being shy. That goes all the way to I'm not paying you.
Yeah, it does.
Because we can't have people that think that they're just making it rain, but then not going to not going to follow through on the full processes.
Hey, Brad.
Yes, sir.
One thing, and I said this yesterday, is I always tell my staff, everybody's not an insured at our agency. We're not here to insure everyone. We don't want to apologize for that. If you're calling and they're just whining, wanting a cheaper quote, wanting, $2,550 or $5,100 or almost to the point now where if they're not wanting 100, 300 or higher, that's our minimum. We're going to send them on down the road. If we don't feel like we can package that client with a renter's policy or a homeowner policy, here again, they're not our client. We walk away from monoline auto if it's not a good story that we can get other lines, because we've got other clients that we're going to spend time with. We're going to be able to write their whole account and keep them in a retention basis. So everybody, your agency's got to be pickier that everybody's not your client. And when I see losses coming into our agency, I always go back and look at that client and see, why did we write this client? Would we write that client again? Was there a red flag that we shouldn't have? And every now and then it slaps us in the face. Why in the world? So, if you're sitting there and you write this account because you think it's going to pay you a nice commission, or it's going to, help your producer statement for the month, and then you realize you shouldn't have, or your boss sees that you wrote it and you shouldn't have had, those things come back to us. And so you got to just be good up front and trust those gut feelings.
Yeah, Kevin, and we're going to have to hit that even a little bit deeper, but the last part was something I was going to add too, which is, depending on where you sit in the agency, you may say, wow, I had a great day today. I signed a $2,000 monoline auto, right? Well, my experience has shown me, if somebody comes to you for price, they're going to leave you for price. And then secondly, that the ability for, whether it's the individual in the agency or, Kevin, you as one of the owners, you're not getting overly rich on the day one that you put a monoline auto in your agency, right? That retention element, that sticky element, the resource used to get them on board and keep them, let alone whether they're going to expose you to a claim, can make them actually a negative impact to you versus what people may perceive as a positive impact to you revenue-wise. So let's get a little bit talk on from a sales process, and this is another example that we're going to share all this with you. There's things that we can do, but we train around, for all our salespeople, that specific sales process. How do they go about it? But then when we were preparing this, I thought it'd be interesting for people to see on the bottom part, what falls down when you don't do this, right? So for instance, we talked about a defined target market or markets, right? It's not, you don't have one client, and we're going to talk about a little bit. There may be some clients that represent a gray fit versus a perfect fit. But if you don't have a defined client, you don't have a good way of making sure that you're trying to attract the majority of the people that fit that. The client may be not a good fit. We talked about for the value prop, and you might find yourself trying to shoehorn a client in with a carrier, right? I think I can get this through. Kevin's point's a great one. If you're calling me, then you probably know this shouldn't be a fit, right? So it can actually very much up front compromise, especially from your carrier standpoint. Why do they keep sending me this stuff? This is very problematic. I've said no 3 times, right? The second one that we train people on from the sales process is how do you go about fully understanding the client's needs and expectations, right? So you can obviously recommend them what would be an incomplete solution if you don't understand all of the things going on with them. You may not know what they're going to express, and then you may miss clues. If you're not in that discussion, tell me more, what's important to you, just so I can level set. If you say those things and then quiet and listen, they're going to tell you some things that could be a clue for you to say, I need to dive into this a little bit more. This may be a problem area that I need to be aware of. But just understand, if you overlook these things, they're going to come back, right? They're going to come back to, at a minimum, cancellations, if not other problematic things. Then the third one we train on is how to pre-qualify the client. How do you actually take what's important to them and know, are they going to be a good fit? And you're leading into the fourth one, which is assessing the carrier fit. But if you don't pre-qualify, you can impact the carrier you're putting it with. You can lessen the expectations with the client. And again, you may miss problem areas. And then next on the carrier fit, this is why I encourage you to very much stay current as it relates to carriers' appetites, carriers' trends. I know when I was at Nationwide, when I was at Grange, I'd love an opportunity to come share what am I seeing in Georgia? What am I seeing in Atlanta? What am I seeing in North Georgia? Whatever it might be, just so that you can be aware of the things that they're aware of. And then that sets the tone with a much healthier relationship and conversation with the underwriter if you need to talk to them. And then lastly, from a full account, and again, we train on this, and it can impact the retention. It can impact the customer's experience. You don't offer umbrella. They have a need where an umbrella would have come into place. Guess who's getting blamed? We tell the story all the time. We're in a hurricane area. Mark? The last hurricane, we had 6 people that took us to court. All
Yes.
6 people had a flood rejection. In our mind, we had ourselves covered. But at the end of the day, our CEO is going, no. We failed because somewhere along the line, somebody said, sign this rejection instead of explaining it. So not only is it important to propose those, but when people walk away from it, you need to make sure they understand the implications. And you don't want to be, I told you so, but you sure don't want to be a, boy, I didn't mention this.
And I think another thing, Brad, we have to consider on the loss control piece as far as claims goes and loss ratios. Don't be overzealous when somebody calls in and says, hey, I need to file a claim. I would first, pause and, get all the information from them, because for one thing, most people don't know what their deductible is. It could be under the deductible, and they may not know, what's covered and what's not. So again, don't be overzealous in filing that claim. Give them some feedback as far as, well, from what you're telling me, why don't you get an estimate first before we file that claim, just so it won't go on their record, and then it won't go on your agency's loss ratio.
Yep. Good thought, Mark. And then when you pivot or think about then, once you've got the client in-house, how formalized for some of the folks on the call, how formalized are you as it relates to doing account reviews? Is it everybody, somebody, some people? What you do it when they contact you? What's the account review process for some of you? Anybody, please.
We're actually
Okay,
doing it on almost everybody. I mean, you know, unless
Okay.
they're staying price wise about the same and everything has been rocking and rolling. But
Yep.
we're literally trying to touch everybody.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Amy. Because hey, look, the account review, and we're all in a different world, right? Carriers are taking rate everywhere. So maybe what you were going to call on 3 years ago from a price increase has risen because you've got so many of them, right? But no matter what the scenario from an account review standpoint, whether you're proactively or you're reacting, take that moment to kind of follow a process like we've got laid out on the slide. You know, how do you fully assess what their current coverages are? How do you know if there's something missing, something you've not clarified, something that's been a trend that you may make them aware of? Look for those gaps. Ask about, do you have this covered elsewhere? Is there something that we don't know, just so that we've got a full view? And then understand, if you're going to broker record, if you're going to bring somebody over, how do you round out that account? We have many agents that are kind of like, they may contact one of our agents. They may say, hey, well, I want you to quote this. They'll inquire about the other lines. That agent will say, look, I'll gladly quote that for you. I need you to make me the agent of record on those. I need you to transfer those over. It stresses the importance of your role versus you're just cobbling things together from an ownership standpoint. And then obviously to the degree, if they're on that last one, if things are out of sync, that can potentially be something you can help solve for them if they didn't realize that was solvable. So Kevin, I don't know if you were going to say something on the account review too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we have finally been an agent for 30 something years, but I've only been an independent agent for about 15, 16. I've been wanting to do account reviews, but it is very difficult in an agency to do it. And, although sometimes people think my agency's perfect, it's not. We have a lot of flaws. And finally this year, we have gotten an automated process going with a vendor doing annual reviews. It starts with 2 or 3 emails going out, trying to get them to do it from an automated standpoint, just a questionnaire that we've developed. And if they don't, we finish with a hard copy phone call, get them to do that. And I'll tell you, we've had huge success with it. We've wrote some very nice additional accounts that we wouldn't have. We found some things that could have been an E&O issue. Thank God we caught them. And account reviews is a must, and it is a game changer when you do it and you do it right.
Yeah, and it's depending on the review and depending on the market you're in, right? It's it may not be as easy as it used to, right? You may not necessarily have solution number 2 or solution number 3 if the carrier they're with has either gone out on the market, increased rates significantly. So getting out in front of it, if your agency doesn't, and again, we can share with you some of the things that we do specifically around this, but again, kind of bolting all this together, account reviews not only has an impact on retention and the client experience, but can also have a significant impact on your loss ratio, claims like Mark mentioned, and other elements around going forward with them. I wanted to put this in here, and all of you may know this, but I think sometimes we lose sight of this. In the personal auto space, people that would identify themselves as shoppers, and shoppers within a regular basis are shopping their auto insurance yearly or have in the past. They represent 42% of the quote activity. So they're driving pretty close to 50% of the quotes, but they only switch 13% of the time. So when you think about the numbers around that and how much sweat equity that is, it can be significant from a resource standpoint, significant from the expectation with clients, and I would encourage you to look for ways to try to determine the seriousness of the individual before you just say, sure, I'll quote, and then I'm going to blindly email you the quote, and then all of a sudden you never hear from them again. So know that how they come to you is going to have the impact that they stay with you, but also try to be very cautious around shoppers and to what degree you just kind of follow through on their requests versus at least getting more information. Can you tell me why you're shopping, right? Can you tell me what you're looking for? Now, and I think we mentioned this yesterday, if I get a shopper that says, hey, I contact your agency, I've heard about it. Reason why I'm calling you is because I never hear from my agent. That's a very different conversation than, oh, by the way, my renter's bill went from $13 a month to $17 a month. So we wanted to kind of share with you some of the red flags we see, broke it down into a few categories. So go ahead, Mark, on the home piece.
Yeah, on the home piece, some of the risks that we see are red flags. Melissa, you had mentioned the first one, swimming pools. They're a huge liability. As you know, it attracts all the kids, from the street. So carriers are a little leery of swimming pools, but just make sure that they're, fenced and all that goes. Trampolines are huge too. Again, they attract the kids. Certain breeds of dogs, y'all probably know which ones carriers don't like, because you can get a lot of, dog bites, that type of thing. Lack of property maintenance. That's a big one. That'll tell you a lot about a homeowner. If you could just, go by the house, see what it looks like, see if it's tidied up, that would be huge before you, get into something that may, be a lot of claims for you. Trees over the home and close to the home. A lot of the carriers are real leery of trees falling on roofs. Make sure they're trimmed, and then trees that are close to the home, what they'll cause is foundation problems. We just don't want any, unnecessary claims that may come in, but those trees the tree roots can cause a lot of damage on the foundation piece. You probably know the roof issue. Try to avoid anything over 15 years old. Carriers are starting to pull back on what they'll approve. I know here in Texas, we've had some carriers that, they want to accept anything over 2 years old. So what does that tell you? It's basically new homes that they're looking for.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, can I add something on the roof thing?
Absolutely.
Georgia roofs are such a major issue.
Yeah.
And, I know we all want to write new business, but we always try to encourage my staff and to talk with the insured. How is your roof? Have that insured look at their roof physically and inspect it themselves before you even go through the quote process. Because if the roof is that old and they're doing it, yeah, you may slip one through underwriting and then you're going to have a claim. But think of the bigger picture. If it's already, they know it's a bad roof, why do you even want to write it? Because then you're going to have to go through 50 different emails with that underwriter and get it canceled. And it's taking your time from writing the good client. Have them do a physical inspection, say, hey, 90% of the people already know if they've got a bad roof or not. So.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
That's a good point, Kevin. Yeah.
That's great, Kevin. Yeah. Also, age of plumbing. You probably know that galvanized pipes, that over time they'll just start having little pinhole leaks everywhere. So underwriting is pretty leery of cast iron pipes. What's the age of their water heater or heat pump? Just outright ask them, hey, when's the last time you drained it? What kind of maintenance do you have on it? That can give you, some ideas as far as where you're at and maybe what underwriting will approve or not. This is a big one, business at the property. A lot of people, work from home now, may have hobbies to earn a little bit of extra money. A lot of people, may have a personal vehicle, then they slap a magnet on for their other business. Anything business related is not going to be covered if a claim comes in. So if they're using that truck for any type of business, not covered. Or the home also in their home. I think we're on home here. Yep. And then look at their claim history. You probably know that, you don't want a lot of small claims filed, towing, a lot of glass, that type of thing. So any others that y'all see?
Can I interject a interesting statistic that we recently heard at a Safeco annual meeting? what percentage do you think a client is likely to file a claim if they have something come back due to like an underwriting edit after you've written it new business wise? So say you write it new business and there's overhanging limbs or there's siding that needs replacing. What percentage of those clients do you think file a claim?
75%.
I'm just going to say 80.
100%.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that
And
crazy?
and
That's
Melissa, further elaborate why that is. Did they tell you why that is?
Well, I mean, if they, so, I don't know if I totally agree with that statistic, but
It's probably
know,
wrong.
we-
It's probably only 99.9.
I mean, there's just a lack of care and
Yeah.
maintaining their property. I think,
Absolutely.
if it takes an underwriter to point it out, they're not going to notice the other things that probably need maintenance on the property. So,
Yep.
my suggestion is, if you don't have an appraisal, or a current inspection, then 4 side pictures of the house or a drive-by, good old drive-by.
Good old
Yep.
drive-by's the best. Yeah.
Yep. Melissa, to that, that's, if I can
Go ahead.
add, we do have an SNA agent, and she brought this up back at one of our meetings. They're making all their insureds send them, if it's out of town and if they can't get to that house to physically look at it, or they can't pull it up online and see all 4 sides, they're making the insured send them 4 pictures of it. And you may think that's too much. It's not today.
It's not-
In
no.
this insurance market in Georgia, it is not. If they're not willing to do that, then you're probably not the best agent that they need to be with. You're a better
Yeah.
agent than they deserve. So going down the road.
Mark, you want to hit auto?
Yeah, auto. One of the big things we see, there's a lot of kids that do Uber and Lyft, and they DoorDash and all that. So be careful. Ask the question, of the parents. Hey, do the kids do any of this? Some carriers will allow that. Some won't. Just know who those carriers are. And then company business, of course, like I mentioned earlier, them slapping a magnet on the side of the car for another business, any claim that comes up will not be covered. Racing's a big deal. Then upgraded accessories, wheels, tires, radios, speakers, that type of thing. Make sure, you ask those questions, because there are some little sub limits within an auto policy on like upgrade radio stuff, custom equipment, that type of thing. Claims history, I think I mentioned earlier, do they have a lot of glass claims, towing claims? Well, this question doesn't get asked a lot, but ask them if they have a salvage clear title or a salvage title. Some may not know the difference, but I think we all know what a salvage title is. It's been wrecked before, and it's been repaired. And then speeding tickets, of course, accidents, that type of thing. Watch out for that.
Cell phone violations are starting to be a huge thing
Mhm.
nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all see a lot of tickets on that in Georgia?
Too. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, Kevin, Ohio just passed it a month ago.
Did they really?
Yeah.
We've had it for many years here in Georgia, but now
Wow.
just a lot of departments are taking zero tolerance in it.
And then go ahead, Mark. I know you and I kind of tag team this one. If you want to talk about the carrier actions, or you want me to hit it?
Yeah, I can do it. That's not a problem.
Okay.
On carrier actions, claim reputation is always a big one. Some carriers are very slow. Some carriers are known to not pay. But some are strict in what they look at in the policy, and then others can be very open and customer focused. Pay attention to the slow customer service carriers. It takes them, days to even contact them or inspect or even payment. I think everybody knows kind of who they are in your situation. Like here in Texas, we've got a carrier that they have such a bad claim reputation that they don't pay at all. And you just can't ever get a hold of an adjuster. So know who those are. And then when you're explaining to the customer why you're not placing them with a certain company, you may say, hey, this is why. Their reputation is not what it should be. And then underwriting, some are strict. Some will, find a solution for you, but get to know the underwriters. They're happy to help you. Put them in your phone. I would also recommend to get some type of claim training. Also, know what the process is for what happens in a total loss situation for a car. What are the steps? Who do they get involved? Or is an engineer involved in a homeowner's claim? Talk to your claims folks at carriers. Get a point person that you can regularly call. They'll be glad to help you too. I know Travelers has a really good, you can call them if a customer calls in and says, hey, is this covered? And maybe you don't know the answer. They have a line where you can call and just ask the question. It's not going to be reported as a claim. It's just they're going to try to help you, and they'll give you an answer like it's likely that it's covered. They're not going to give you a definite answer, but they're just going to take what the customer tells them or what you tell them and go with those facts. But that's a good resource if you're not real sure on a claim situation. And then know the company financials. I think we've had 18 carriers here within the last year that have gone under. So yeah, we want to make
Melissa,
sure.
you raise your eyebrows. You can imagine how much work for the same dollar occurred, right? When you get ambushed, and it's not like we're thinking about it. It's like we're done next Tuesday.
Yeah, no, it's happened. Yeah, we've had a lot of carriers or clients with those carriers, and we've had to move them all, and it's it takes a lot of time to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Mark, quick. Let me ask you a question. I'd be curious to your opinion on it. Do you think a carrier that is a stock company versus a mutual company, which carrier do you think is more likely to pay a gray area claim?
Mutual.
It's not close.
And explain that. I knew the answer to that, but I think a lot of people on this call may not think about that when they're choosing a carrier to place your insured.
Yeah, stock companies are owned by who? Shareholders, right? So they're mainly after profit. Mutual companies are owned by who?
Policyholder. Yep.
Yep, absolutely. So they're more likely to pay out and be a little bit more customer focused than those stock companies.
And again, we can share. I mentioned earlier we have that best company first. That literally is one of the steps that we ask every one of our producers to consider, because both the claim experience, and you may not think, you may go, well, why are you talking about carrier actions? This can have that element, right, as it relates to, do you have the right fit? Do they have the right tolerance? Do you have a carrier that's flexible? That can, at the end of the day, maybe not necessarily as directly in some of the other clues or red flags, but it can still have an impact on you managing your loss ratio. And then we talked about it a couple, I think Kevin may have mentioned, or we talked about it, right? So, if some people could share what, do you have agency or do you have minimum standards that you quote on today?
Well, we don't like to do anything below 100, 300, 100 for sure.
Okay. So Amy, for you, hey, I want state minimums. What's your answer?
Sorry, we don't recommend it, and this is what we can offer you.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Everybody else on the call similar to that? I hope.
Brad, one thing that a lot of people don't know that honestly I didn't know until about 6 months or a year ago, having 2550 or 5100 actually is punitive to that insured if they try to change companies. To my point, all your preferred companies will tell you, they won't take someone, they're going to punish that insured if they've got a 2550 limit or 5100. They're going to charge them more than if they had 100, 300 before.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know that. You need to ask your carriers about that.
Yeah, Kevin, I think that actually came up yesterday with somebody volunteered that they actually recommend changing with the existing customer so they're not living at those minimums before they go to switch because of the money difference in the price break. You're absolutely right. And Amy, you did a great job, but hopefully everybody's got some what I would call standard wording to explain to customers why it's not necessary or why that's not a good fit. I can tell you most agencies do what you say, which is this is what we can offer. If you're looking for something different, we may not be a good fit. Love to work with you, love to help you, whatever. And then to the last part you talked about, which is a potential client. So this came up yesterday, and I can't remember if we have it on a slide, but I want to hit it here. So. How many people on the call will entertain a monoline quote? If I called you and said, hey, can you quote my auto? Are you just going to send me an auto quote back? No, yes, I see.
Well, we want to ask if we can quote your other items as well while we have you on the phone.
Okay. Does anybody out there say, look, if you're not going to give me an at-bat for all of them, I'm not going to do it? You do? Good. Okay. Something to think about. It's an interesting vetting process, right? Because if somebody happens to call you and they want your auto quote, at a minimum, you need to get a story for them of why. Why just that, right? What problematic situation is it? This is what we're all about. I know yesterday it came up in the call. There's probably some gray area that you may accept it, but there may be some circumstance where similar to what we talked about with the minimums, you just say, if I'm not going to have an opportunity to quote it, then I'm not going to pursue it. I know it was mentioned yesterday, and I know Georgia is it's a different environment, but there are states where you can say, Mark, I'll gladly quote that for you. We have a standard $25 agency fee. How would you like to pay for that fee so I can get the quote going? So that's something that I know Georgia requires some additional licensing. My point about that example is be really careful if somebody comes to you and early on they're not consuming, kind of your Kool-Aid as it relates to what you want to do and how you want to be able to treat them like a client and make the offering. If they're not willing to, if you're not getting an at-bat at all their lines of insurance, if they're very unaccepting of having anything more than minimums, just realize if it looks bad, it's probably bad. Very rarely do they turn out to be fantastic clients that you're going to say, I'm so glad I took that call and quoted that monoline auto and gave them state minimums. Any questions on any of those? And then I think the one here, so this is just an example of what we standardly quote. Okay, so we have a mixture within our environment of people that agents that run their own quotes, and then some agents that are able to leverage kind of some quoting resources. But we set this up, right? So our expectation is our opening bid is actually 500. Now I would say we would obviously never go to state minimums. I would say the lowest we would go will be 100, 300. But just keep in mind, depending on how you want to position this may vary a little bit, but this is our opening bid and what we provide when we're turning around a quote on audit. Towing, rental reimbursement, OEM, those are all things that specific to what we're at, right, have turned to be some of the more, what we would say necessary or non-negotiables as it relates to either coverage options and or limits. I would hope for all of you, you all have very established ones. And if you do, hopefully they're documented and they're actually trained on or available. Make sure everybody gets some transparency. Look, not everybody may see the total value of 500, right? But just like you have a ceiling or a bottom, you say, I'm never going to go to state minimum. You may want to think about what are you seeing in the marketplace and what could be the right opening bid, right, as it relates to the coverages, not only the types, but the limits themselves. Comments or reactions on that? And again, this is just for an illustration standpoint to share with you what we do. And then if for instance, if some of our selling agents then take this quote and they massage it, we don't slap them if they go below 500, but we do pull them out of line and have a scolding if they would ever think about going below, for instance, 100, 300. And then on the home, this is an example of kind of a fully loaded home quote for us. And Mark, keep me honest. I know yesterday it came up. Foundation endorsement, I think, was something that isn't very prevalent in Georgia. I think a couple people talked about that, had never seen that before.
Yeah, I actually checked Travelers policy for Georgia, and they don't offer foundation, and it is specifically excluded in the main policy. So
okay, so it's a good example where, and again, we're trying to share with you not necessarily the exacts of this and say absolutely parrot this, but have that documented, know what you're adding, and then if you need to then say, okay, then I need to work on the price, then you've got a starting point consistently as it relates to some of potentially the trade-offs of either eliminating coverage types or lessening the limits to be able to maybe get something that's more affordable in the budget that they're looking for. And again, this all goes to expectation of not only finding the right fit, but setting the right tone with the client, right? As it relates to claims, awareness, what's covered, what's not, red flags. I've never seen this. I've had this, whatever. You'd be surprised of the conversations you can get in just by recommending some of these coverage types that maybe on the surface you wouldn't have uncovered if you're just having a much more stripped down quote from with a client. So questions for the group. Anything that we didn't cover, or that we can do some homework on? We can make sure we intentionally tried to do these sessions spaced out so that, and I got a couple of things from yesterday. If there's something we need to add into next week's session, we've got the flexibility to be able to do that. Is there anything out there that you guys have questions on or want us to potentially hit on or add to? If there's nothing, that's fine. For everybody, what we're going to do is we recorded yesterday's and today's sessions. We're going to make the recordings of what, not that necessarily you're going to want to necessarily relive this last hour and 15 minutes time and time again, but we are going to make the recordings available to everybody. And then if something does come up that comes to you afterwards, I would tell you we've got a pretty good outline in next week's, but if I get something, Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning and say, hey, can you make sure you cover this topic? This came up. We gladly will. We gladly will. We want this session to be relevant to you, not just us talking generically and can't help you going forward.